Hi, everyone. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone, to we're on week 9, and we're next week we'll be looking at chapter 9 in You Are the Happiness That You Seek. And thank you all for coming back. Today we have as you know, we have a special guest, the author of the book that we're following and loving. And really appreciate Rupert Spira taking the time out of his busy schedule to be with us. And before I turn this over to Rupert, I just want to mention that he has a retreat this weekend that's based on the content of this book. And you probably want to get your spot before it hits 1,000 people. Yeah, it could do that. Susan will drop the link in the chat, and you can click on that and save it until after the broadcast, and then get your spot. And thank you, Rupert, for being here. We really appreciate your the book that you've given to the world that we're really enjoying, and also that you would come in personally and support the content of it. Thank you for being here.
Not at all, Bill. Pleasure, as always, to be with you. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Lots of familiar faces and quite a few new faces as well. So lovely to be with you.
So the way this will work, Rupert will open in whatever way he chooses, and then he'll take questions. I only have one that was emailed in. The questions will be on a raise your hand function, if you can just use that raise hand feature when he's ready. And Rupert, the mic is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, I was imagining that we would go straight into a conversation, questions. If you'd like me to do a brief meditation, I'd be very happy to. Which would you prefer?
I think a brief meditation would be
a brief meditation. Okay, all right.
So, yes.
Okay. Simply take the thought, I am, and allow yourself to be drawn into that to which these words refer. The words I am refer to the fact of simply being. And everybody has the experience of simply being all the time. But for most people, their being is mixed up with the content of experience, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and so on. And therefore they do not experience their being as it essentially is. That is, before it is colored or qualified by the content of experience. In other words, they do not experience the pure I am. They experience I am this or I am that. If we simply take the thought I am, or sound the name I am once, and allow ourselves to be drawn into its referent, we experience the fact of simply being before it is qualified or conditioned by experience. That is, our being experiences itself. The awareness of simply being.
Committee highlighting an explosive meeting on December 18th. Unofficial advisors.
When our being is divested of all the qualities or characteristics that it derives from the content of experience, it loses its limitations, its personal qualities. It remains, of course, utterly intimate or innermost, and is yet at the same time impersonal and infinite. this utterly intimate, impersonal, infinite being is traditionally referred to in the West as God. And thus, to simply be is not only the highest form of meditation, it is also the ultimate prayer. It is what the Christian mystics refer to as the practice of the presence of God. And to remain in being, as being, under all circumstances, is what is referred to in the Orthodox Church as to pray without ceasing. Divested of the agitation that characterizes our thoughts, our being stands revealed as peace. In the absence of the sense of lack that characterizes our feelings, our being stands revealed as happiness. Divested of all the qualities that our being divested from all the qualities that our being derives from the content of experience. Being is unlimited and thus extends way beyond the limits of the individual. There are not numerous beings. There is one being. From which all people, all animals, and all things derive their apparently independent existence. And this felt sense of our shared being is the experience to which we refer as love and beauty. Love in relation to people and animals, and beauty in relation to things and nature. Thus, the nature of being is peace and happiness in relationship to our interior experience, and love and beauty in relationship to our external experience. And although infinite being precedes and transcends us as apparent individuals, nevertheless, it is the recognition of the nature of being within ourselves that makes us truly human. In other words, to be truly human, we must first recognize the divine within us. Okay, let's start our conversation. Please feel free to ask about anything you like.
Stefan?
Is that me?
Yes, Stefan Lowry, please. Is it Lowy?
Yes.
Yes,
Please unmute your mic.
Stefan, hello. Nice to meet you.
Stephen.
Stephen.
It's Stephen. Yeah, it's nice to meet you as well. And I need to thank you for all the wonderful content you put up on the internet. I've really enjoyed your conversations with Bernardo Kastrup, and they've helped me to inform my work on philosophical investigations into phenomenologies, personalities like Max Shaler and such. On April 17th, I wrote a poem dedicated to your teaching. It's quite short. I'd like to read it for you now, if that's okay.
Of course, yes.
Okay. It's called The Untimely End of Rupert Spira. Infinity is a funny thing. You can see into it as far as you like, but you never come to the end of it, because the end of it is you, and there is no end to you. You are the end you seek. There you will find yourself. There you will find the end of the searching, the seeking, the teaching of Rupert Spira.
That's beautiful, Stephen. Thank you. I'm sure you know that the words Advaita Vedanta really also mean the end of the teaching. The Vedas are the end of the teaching, which is the ultimate teaching, of course. So I'm very touched by your poem, Stephen. Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening to it. And I really enjoyed meeting you today. I heard a little voice always saying, share this poem with him, share this poem with him.
Yes,
and
lovely.
then the message popped up today, and there you are. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Rupert, we have a question that someone, that Henrik asked, that someone else said, please ask Henrik's question. It's typed in at 12:01. If universal consciousness is responsible for all actions, does that imply that no one makes choices or is responsible for what is done? That's the question. And then he has a commentary that, to me, it seems like I have both choices and responsibilities, and is hopefully guided by an inspired intuition about what to do. When I ask this question, is it not my own choice to do so?
It's true that there is ultimately no individual entity that chooses, that acts, and therefore that is responsible. But this does not mean that there are not choices, actions, and responsibility. And we as human beings are the vehicle through which the one reality, the one consciousness chooses, acts, and is responsible. So it feels from the point of view of the individual that the individual chooses, acts, and is responsible. The choices, actions, and responsibility come through the individual, are expressed by the individual. But ultimately, they don't originate with the individual. So, but there are choices, there are actions, and as such, there is responsibility. So, at a more relative level, yes, we as human beings, if we could make a concession to the human being and say that the human being is the one that chooses and decides and acts, as opposed to saying the human being is the one through whom choices, decisions, and actions take place, then we could say that we all have a responsibility. We all make choices. We all have a responsibility. What is it that should guide our choices, our actions, our decisions? The great understanding. What is the great understanding? Peace and happiness are the nature of our being, and we share our being with everyone and everything. These two fundamental principles of truth should be our guidance in all the choices, decisions, actions that we make and the responsibility that we take. In other words, we should lead our lives. Our bodies and minds we should align them with these two principles of truth. Peace and love are the nature of our being, and we share our being with everyone and everything. And our bodies and minds should be used in service of, as expressions of, as celebrations of this truth. So I don't remember the name, Bill, of the person that asked the question.
That was Henrik. He's been around
Henrik.
for a long
So
time.
there are two answers to you, Henrik. One on the absolute level, and then coming down from the absolute level to the relative level. Thank you for your question, Henrik.
Thank you. And we have another write-in, but I'm going to take Lynn first. Lynn, would you unmute your mic, please? Lynn's iPad.
Hello.
Yes, Lynn, hello.
I think about Ebenezer Scrooge, and I think about what he went through that night and how he was, pardon me, I'm losing my voice. And I always thought that's what happiness looked like. And that's what I wanted. Am I on the right path? Was he on the right path? Is that what happiness is? The way he was giving and loving and forgiving, and after his dark night of the soul, so to speak?
Yes, he realized that the self in him, who previously suffered and as a result previously sought happiness, was an illusion. And with this recognition, his actions ceased to arise on behalf of an illusory self, and instead arose on behalf of the compassion he felt for others. This is the second principle that I referred to, the understanding that we share our being with everyone and everything. And because his actions were no longer initiated by or performed in the service of a separate self, this enabled the happiness that is the nature that was the nature of his being to shine forth, whereas previously it was obscured by his belief and feeling of separation.
When I get still and I don't feel that what I assumed is that happiness or that giddiness or that thrillingness or.
But Lynn, happiness is not giddiness or thrillingness. Giddiness and thrillingness are the effects of happiness. In the case of giddiness on the body, in the case of thrillingness on the mind. These are the side effects of happiness in the mind that may or may not take place. I'm sure you've also had moments of peace or quiet joy that are not accompanied by giddiness or thrillingness, but are nonetheless still deep experiences of peace or joy. So don't mistake the side effects that may accompany the non-objective experience of happiness for happiness itself.
Thank you, Rupert.
Nice to meet you, Lynn.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, here's a write-in question from Lindsay. She's on, but she doesn't have good technology. She's traveling right now, but she asked me to read her question. Rupert, you've said that one of the first things that Francis ever told you was to accept everything as it appears. I'm paraphrasing. And that it took you 15 years to understand what he meant. This, along with key points that you make in this book, have me investigating the nature of reality being. Now that time has passed, what major point would you say was the missing element between what Francis said and what you discovered that allowed you to finally understand him?
The words, sorry, Bill, tell me again the name of the person asking the question.
Lindsay. It's a
Lindsay. Lindsay, the words that you're referring to, universal is a yes saying to everything. There was no final understanding. There was a gradual clearing away of beliefs and feelings that obscured or veiled the nature of the being that I essentially am, and its nature of peace on the inside and love on the outside. So I can't point to a final understanding. This statement that meditation is a universal yes saying to everything, it refers to the inherent openness and emptiness of awareness. When I say emptiness, I mean empty of objective content. That what we the being that we essentially are, or the aware being that we essentially are, the presence of awareness, is inherently open. To begin with, I felt that this openness was something that one had to practice, that one had to practice acceptance, that acceptance was something that could and needed to be practiced with the mind. It took me some time to recognize that this openness is the nature of awareness. That the physical space in your room, Lindsay, doesn't have to practice welcoming you into it every time you walk through the door. Its nature is to do so. Welcoming is what it is, not what it does. So it took me some time, because I had been very focused on practicing for 20 years before this event, before first hearing these words. So I had a very strong conditioning of practicing, doing, achieving, repeating a mantra, trying to change the content of my mind, and so on. Trying to change negative emotions from positive. And so it took me some time to recognize that my essential being, the fact of being aware, or awareness itself, is already at peace, already unconditionally fulfilled, already open without resistance to all experience. So I can't point to a particular time, a final event. It's best if one can't point to a final event. It's more like you have a headache. You wake up with a headache in the morning, and you go about your day, and then sometime in the evening you notice that your headache has left you. You cannot refer to a final moment when your headache left. You just notice in retrospect, oh, my headache is no longer there. You don't know exactly how it left you or when it left you, but you know that it has left you because you're no longer in pain. So it's the same thing. The sorrow, the agitation that characterizes the separate self or the ego leaves us. We don't necessarily know how or when or where. We just notice, usually in retrospect, that our life is no longer accompanied by this sorrow and agitation. So thank you, Lindsay, for your question.
Rupert, I'm here. I just
Oh,
couldn't.
you're there. Good. I
yes,
can see.
hi.
Yeah, there you are. Hi.
You know, I guess what I was trying to, that was a beautiful explanation, but didn't you also say it was the first book I ever read of yours, and I'm on vacation, so I don't have the book with me, but it's something about, at some point you went to hug Francis and you felt this amazing like fusion or energy.
That was a dream, Lindsay. That was a dream I had.
Okay. Yeah. Because I'm like, does that happen every time you hug somebody?
No, Lindsay, I intuit from both your questions or your first question and this this instant that you relate, that you're expecting this recognition to be accompanied by some extraordinary sign.
Yes.
That something marvelous is going to happen to you. That fine, you can, and you can finally say to yourself and to everyone else, the final event, the final understanding. Very occasionally, Lindsay, very occasionally, there are references in the traditional literature of such events, but in the vast majority of cases, it doesn't happen like this. And of course, those for whom it doesn't happen like this don't have great stories to write about. Oh, it was the 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 25th of May, 1973. So there's no great story to tell. Therefore, we tend only to hear the stories of the very few for whom this recognition was accompanied by some significant event in the body or the mind. And this builds up some degree of expectation in us. Remember Shunryo Suzuki, who was asked he was a Zen teacher in America in the, I don't know, the 70s, 80s. He was asked by one of his students, why don't you ever talk about your enlightenment experience? And his wife stood up at the back of the hall and said, because he never had one.
Right.
Enlightenment is not an experience. It is not something that happens to the body or the mind, although it may. Well, it will always be accompanied by signs, effects in the body and the mind, but they are very rarely dramatic. Okay. They are usually effects that happen gradually over a period of time, and our minds are usually the last to know about it.
And that was in this chapter that, we're reviewing, that we were, reading today, was that there's nothing extraordinary about it. And I've heard you say this many times, and I've got it. I didn't realize that. That's my bad. I didn't realize it was a dream. It was a long time ago that I read it. I think maybe, anyway.
That's okay.
I had one quick other question. It's a quickie. Attention is something that is, although it can be rapid fire, it's something that's focused and you can only be hearing or seeing, or you can't do everything at once, right? It's one thing at a time, correct?
Well, you can be hearing and seeing at the same time. For instance, I am seeing you and hearing you, but the mind, but I'm only having one experience at the moment. The mind conceptualizes the experience that I'm currently having as hearing and seeing, and indeed touching, smelling, and so on. So that's how the mind fragments and conceptualizes the unity of experience. But experience itself is always one thing, which ultimately speaking is consciousness. The mind divides it up into seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, thinking, feeling, and so on.
So when you talk about true openness or that pure listening, that is the relaxing of those conceptions of that the mind is breaking up into many and sort of softening to that open listening. How do you go from the one thing at a time to just everything all at once, indivisible?
Well, Lindsay, if I were to ask you now, are you having one experience or 100 experiences now? What would you say?
One. Yeah.
Okay. And now if you were to touch the stuff your current experience is made of, what would you find there?
Knowing.
That's it.
Knowing.
That's it. Knowing or consciousness is all that is ever experienced, and it is consciousness that experiences it.
So when you ask people, are you aware? And their answer is yes, of course. That's the answer. I am. You can't really, you stop after I am. But if you were to be able to fill in the blank, I am aware. You are awareness.
Actually, it is legitimate, Lindsay, to say I am, and then to add to, if we would then ask, but how do you know that I am? That then we answer, I know that I am. In other words, our experience is not just that I am. Our experience is, in fact, I know that I am. Because we would not be able to assert I am if we did not know that I am. So in fact, what we mean when we say I am is I know that I am, or the awareness of being.
Okay. Right. And so as long as you say I am, and you're the knowing, you're the awareing, you're the experiencing, as long as it's not objective, that's the answer. And that's that overall experience of everything all at once, that open listening, that waiting without waiting, I hear, people say is that's what that is then, correct? Am I on the right path or no, not so much?
Lindsay, I think you're overthinking it.
Well, that's typical. All right.
Just see that being or aware being, consciousness, is the essential nature of who you are. Mm-hmm. Be open to the possibility that consciousness extends beyond the limits of you as a person, just as the space in your room appears to be limited by the four walls of your room, but in fact extends way beyond the four walls of your room and is in fact the space in which the entire universe appears. So I'm not suggesting that the entire universe appears in your individual mind, or indeed the sum total of all individual minds. I'm suggesting it is the essence of all individual minds, but extends way beyond all individual minds and encompasses what we call the universe, and is ultimately what we call the universe.
That's that expanding that you talk about, that expansion. That
it's not really an expansion, and consciousness never expands or contracts any more than the space in your room expands or contracts. But to one who feels, or to one who has felt, I am a temporary, limited, finite self for many decades, the recognition of their true nature may, at least to begin with, feel like an expansion.
Okay.
It is actually the relaxation of a previous contraction. Yes.
Okay. I hope that helped other people too. I'm sorry to take up so much time. Thank you so
Quite all right.
much.
No, thank
So
you,
nice.
Lindsay. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupert and Lindsay. Awesome questions. Holger, you're up. Would you please unmute your mic?
Holger, hello.
Yes, hello, Rupert. Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm so fascinated on one level how simple the teaching is.
Yes.
Because we can think forever and it's just infinite thoughts. But
it's
can
like
you say something about it?
Yes. Holger, you're right. The great understanding is so simple. But most of our minds are complex. And as a compassionate concession to the complexity of our minds, the simple truth or the simple understanding has refracted itself into numerous ideas in order to accommodate our numerous objections. But as our objections are gradually answered and resolved, that our mind becomes simpler and simpler, clearer and clearer. And in the end, the understanding is so simple. It's just the analogy that I sometimes use is a jigsaw puzzle where you start off with a chaos of 1,000 pieces. And it just feels so complicated, just impossible to get your mind around it. You start with the corners, and then you fill in the edges, then you begin to fill in the middle. And at the end, it goes very quickly. You're not left with 1,000 things, you're just left with one thing. It's the same. The understanding is just one thing. But it starts off with being presented as 1,000 ideas.
And since a little bit more than a year, I'm meeting with friends I met on Zoom. Like in this meeting through chat or something, I asked them for their email and we then met in person. And we have a small group right now. We may be like 6 or 10 people. We meet 3 times a week for 2 hours. And it's just so wonderful. I mean, just to have same-hearted humans and to just speak to hear ourselves talk, to feel ourselves.
Yes.
And maybe to try to explain the teaching to each other or to see where there are difficulties. And it's just such a gift. And I would just like to encourage this for other people, just to be brave and just to connect with other people and to just meet human to human.
Yes. You know, Olga, that prompts me to say something that I noticed that I feel and say much more in my live retreats, not so much online now, but particularly on the live retreats. Many of the people that come to my live retreats either have been several times before, and the ones that come new have done their homework on YouTube. So it's a very mature crowd that come. And not so much explanation and higher reasoning is necessary anymore. Possibly also because my own pathways have become shorter and clearer, more economical, more direct. So the teaching has really, I've noticed it's evolved. And there's a certain amount of reason, of course, and explanation, but it really comprises two elements now. Abidance and friendship. It doesn't take long to take someone from the agitation of their mind and the sorrow of their feelings back to their true nature. And all that remains is to abide them. So a lot of rational explanation, it gives way to abidance. And then the friendship, and this is what I wanted to say in response to what you've said, the friendship element is a very important element of the teaching. The Buddha, in Buddhists say, refer to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, the teacher, the teaching, and the community of friends that gather around the teaching. This community of friends, it is itself a vehicle of the understanding. It's the means, one of the means by which this understanding communicates itself. And wordlessly, you don't need to be talking non-duality. You can be watching a movie together or having a meal, just discussing your everyday lives. And so, yes, thank you for mentioning that. It's very true.
I'm in my explorations, I'm using websites. For example, I created a website a while ago. It's called friendsofrupertspira.com. It's just a draft, just an idea. And since this is recorded, maybe someone will check it out and have a look.
Okay,
and
well,
the problem for me is just we cannot make a machine out of it. It has to be organic. It has to be natural. It's more like an
absolutely. Art. Exactly. Yes. Well, do please let me know through Bill if you launch your website and
no, there is a website. It's just one page sharing an
okay,
idea.
I see. Okay, nice. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rupert.
Good. Thank you, Holger.
Thank you, Holger. There was a request from that last conversation from two people, same one. Can you explain what abidance means?
Yes. To abide in yourself, to abide in the self, is just to rest in being, as being. It's what we do naturally in deep sleep every night. It's what takes place naturally on the fulfillment of a desire when the seeking mind comes to an end and we just return to our being and pause there, remain there. So abidance is just to remain simply being, not to be doing anything, not to be seeking, not to be practicing, not to be resisting, just to be. To rest in being. It's really the culmination of all methods of meditation or prayer. That is, all methods of meditation or prayer ultimately, sooner or later, culminate in simply being. Abiding in being, as being, resting as being. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, if you don't know how to access your being, then one of the ways, there are various ways, but one of the ways was the way we started off this gathering. Say to yourself, I am. Don't say these words, of course, mechanically. Everybody can say from their actual experience, I am. In other words, when we say I am, it refers to an experience which we are having. So, one direct way to access our being is to just say to oneself once, I am. And then, as it were, to go to relax into the experience to which these words refer. So I hope that answers your question. Please come back if it doesn't.
That was awesome. Very practical. Melanie, would you please unmute your mic?
Yes.
Hello,
Can you hear
Melanie.
me, Bill? Hello, Rupert.
Hello,
Lovely
Melanie.
to meet you.
Likewise.
I'm slightly hesitant now because you have brought us to a point of such beautiful simplicity, and I'm going to get slightly technical.
Okay.
And I hope you, I hope you'll forgive me. I'd like your clarity around. You often use the language of the activity of consciousness. And my understanding is that awareness, consciousness itself, is the field in which experience arises, but it's not affected by experience. And for me, that's not just an intellectual understanding, it's my felt experience. And in religious language, we call it the impassibility of God. The Bhagavad Gita talks about not the slayer, nor the slain, not the doer, nor the, I'm sure you understand the point I'm making. And I think it's partly a concession to language, but I think there can be confusion there for people. So I wondered if you would help. Does that make sense, Rupert?
Okay. Yes.
Could
yes,
you clarify what you mean?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Melanie, you're absolutely right. Do you like the word consciousness or awareness?
Probably awareness.
Awareness. You're absolutely right. Awareness is indeed the field, the open, empty field within which all experience appears. But it's not just the open, empty field within which experience appears. It is also the knowing with which all experience is known. So the field of awareness is not just open and empty. It's not just the container of experience. It could also be said to be luminous because it is a knowing space, not an inert space. It's not like inert physical space. It's a knowing space that both contains all experience and simultaneously knows all experience. However, it is also not just that in which all experience appears and that with which all experience is known. It is that out of which all experience is made.
Yes.
So
The
as an
immanence.
analogy, so as an analogy, take the screen, the TV screen on which a movie is playing, but imagine a magical screen that is itself aware. So this is not a TV screen that is being watched by someone sitting on a sofa. The screen is watching the movie that is playing on it. Now, the screen is both the medium upon which or within which the movie is playing. That's an analogy for the space of awareness within which experience arises. The screen is also that which knows the movie, just as awareness is that which knows experience. But the screen is also that out of which the movie is made. Just as awareness is
Yes.
that out of which experience is made. So it has this, we could say it has these three qualities. It is that to which experience appears, within which experience appears, and that out of which experience is made, or that of which experience is the activity. Just as we could say the movie is the activity of the screen. The screen
Yes,
itself
yes.
doesn't move, but its appearances seem to move. Likewise, awareness itself doesn't move, but the forms that it assumes move. So it is both a movement and a rest simultaneously. Just as the screen
Beautiful.
doesn't move, but the movie does move simultaneously. And yet they are the
Yeah.
same thing. Moving if we see the screen, moving if we see a movie, unmoving if we see the screen, but they're the same thing.
In the stillness dancing. Beautifully put.
Exactly.
Thank you, Rupert.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Very
Nice to
helpful. And you too.
Thank you. We have about, we're going till a quarter past the hour. So we have a couple of questions still and one in the chat. So Milena, would you please unmute your mic? I hope I said that right.
Thank
Melina?
you very much. Yes, yes. Yes.
Hello, Melina.
Hello, Rupert. Nice to see you. I've read in the book we are just reading, you wrote that you felt happiness, yeah, and it was one day, and then came a moment, and the next day you knew you are the happiness. Yes, am I right? Hopefully.
Yes.
And I feel I know these states of happiness. Yeah, I feel it now. Yeah, and but I am the knower of the happiness. I don't feel
Well,
I am that.
Okay. Yes, Milena, strictly speaking, happiness is what we are, not something we know. And unhappiness is something we know, not what we are. We cannot be unhappy, we can only know it. And we cannot know happiness, we can only be it. As soon as you say, I am happy,
Yeah.
you have separated yourself from the experience. And at that moment, you lose your innocence. You lose the innocence of the happiness. You've given it a name. In the actual experience of happiness itself, we don't think, I am happy. We are one with it. We can only think about something we separate ourselves from, just as the eye can only see something that is at a distance from itself.
Yeah.
That's why it's not possible to think of consciousness. We can try to think of consciousness, and that effort may take us to the experience of being conscious or being aware, but we cannot actually think of consciousness. You can think of a glass because you can separate yourself from a glass and know the glass objectively. You can only think about something that has objective qualities. Now, this doesn't invalidate the effort to think of consciousness. It's a very good effort to make, to think of consciousness, because the attempt to think of consciousness takes us to the experience of consciousness itself, or rather it takes consciousness to its experience of itself. So stop thinking about being happy, Milena. Just be happy, or be happiness. Just
Okay.
be happiness. Don't
Okay.
think about it.
Okay.
And by
Thanks.
thinking about it, you prevent the spontaneity, the innocence,
Yes.
you're trying to make it into an object. You're trying to make it into something.
Yes. Yes.
No,
I can
it's
see
never
that.
something.
Yeah.
Our suffering is something. It's an object. Our sorrow, our despair, our loneliness, our etc. But happiness is remember William Blake, he who binds himself to a joy does the winged life destroy. Live the winged life. Don't bind yourself to a joy. Don't try to. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. Don't try to grasp happiness. Let it go.
Yes. Yes,
If you let
you.
it go, it will come after you.
Yes.
If you grasp it, it'll run away from you. If you let it go, it'll run after you.
Yes, thank you very much. Nice.
Nice to meet you, Milena.
Nice to meet you.
Here's a question that I've been asked to read from Ron on the chat. Hello to everyone. Greetings from Chicago. Thank you for this session, Rupert. I thought I'd post my question here since we're approaching the top of the hour. My family, friends, and I are thankful for the peace, safety, and health we have. But we also know that there are scores of people around the world in pain and suffering, tension and conflict. How do we best share or extend peacefulness and contentment to them?
Ron, there are as many ways as there are as many ways of sharing this understanding, or the peace that is the hallmark of this understanding, as there are individuals or people. How we do it varies. I'm doing it in one way, speaking about these matters and writing about these matters, but there are many other ways. Many other people communicate this understanding in very different ways. There's almost no area of human endeavor that cannot be harnessed to and used as an expression of this understanding. So, Ron, I can't give you a very specific answer, because it depends very much on your skills, your inclinations, your proclivities, your talents, your circumstance, and so on. Some people just express this understanding to a relatively small group of people, their immediate friends, families, colleagues, and so on. Other people have a broader, a wider audience, but the size of the audience doesn't really matter, because all of our minds are connected by virtue of the fact that they all appear in and ultimately are made of the same consciousness. Therefore, what takes place in any mind affects all minds in some degree. So, Ron, just use your body-mind, all the talents and inclinations and skills that you have to express this understanding in whatever way feels easy, natural, joyful for you. And it is for each of us to do that in our own way. The way I'm doing it is just one such way. There are many other ways.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupert. And Martin, would you please unmute your mic? We might have time for 2 questions, but it could be just this last one.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Hi, Rupert.
Hello, Martin.
Hello. I have a question of your book now. We are at chapter 8, a very beautiful chapter about your own, realizations process. And especially on page 67, I was very touched by your description that awareness permeates your body, and therefore it's natural, or you think it's logical, that you think that your awareness is in your body.
Yes.
So it feels for all people that it is in your body. So this is very crucial. And then you come with the analogy of the room, and then afterwards you say, that awareness is not in your body, but your body appears in awareness. So it's the other way around. So that's a
Yes.
very crucial realization in the process. And that's also for me very important. So it was very good to read this permeates awareness, permeates your body. So it feels like it's in your body.
Yes. Yes.
And it's difficult. All the analogies, all the descriptions are there, like the screen, like the room, and so forth, and you can think about it, but you cannot feel it. You cannot.
Yes, and awareness perceives the world through the sense faculties of the body. In fact, it's through the sense faculties of the mind. But let's say for the time being through the body. So awareness perceives the world through the body, through the faculties of seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. But this does not in any way imply that awareness is located in the body. When Mary falls asleep in London and she dreams that she's Jane on the streets of Paris, Mary views the streets of Paris through Jane's body. But Mary's mind is not located in Jane's body on the streets of Paris. Indeed, it's not located anywhere in the world that Jane seems to perceive. It's true that Mary's mind pervades Jane's body in the dream, but it also pervades the entire world and is indeed the entire world. Mary's mind is not contained. Sorry.
So Mary is awareness.
Mary is infinite consciousness. Jane is a finite mind.
Yeah.
Now, when Jane closes her eyes, the streets of Paris disappear. When Jane opens her eyes, the streets of Paris reappear. And she concludes from this that whatever it is that is perceiving the streets of Paris must live just behind her eyes. And everybody else on the streets of Paris who perform the same experiment draw the same conclusion, because whenever anybody closes their eyes, the world disappears. Whenever anybody opens their eyes again on the streets of Paris, the world reappears. So everybody that Jane meets on the streets of Paris concludes that awareness must be located inside each person's head and therefore must be separate, because all the bodies are separate. Now, of course, when Mary wakes up, we realize this conclusion was completely wrong. Mary's mind, it was the same mind, Mary's mind, who was looking through all the bodies on the streets of Paris. But because each of those people on the streets of Paris believe themselves to be temporary finite consciousnesses, they imagined that consciousness shared the limits and the destiny of their own body.
So who has to be awakened now to see?
It's only consciousness that is awake, and consciousness is always awake. Consciousness is like the sun; it doesn't have an off button. It's always awake, but it localizes or seems to localize itself in the form of each of our finite minds, and in doing so, it seems to limit itself. That's why each of us feel that we are a limited consciousness or a limited person. But even when we're limited people, it is still the one consciousness that is experiencing whatever it is each of us seems to be experiencing.
But the realization looks like it's an individual realization, like your realization description in chapter 8. And now I'm working on it, on the same realization, like other people are telling. So it looks
but
it's
not the individual that realizes, Martin. It's not it's Mary has the experience, I am Mary. Jane doesn't have the experience, I am Mary. Only Mary can have the experience, I am Mary. So when we recognize I am consciousness, those words are a statement that the individual mind makes, but the experience to which those words refer is the experience, is universal consciousness. Is universal consciousness's experience of itself.
Amazing.
Remember the beautiful words of Balayani. Only that sees itself. Only that reaches itself. Only that knows itself. It knows itself by itself, and it reaches itself by means of itself alone. Only that knows itself. That sent itself from itself, through itself, to itself. There is no intermediary or means other than that. There is no distance or difference between the sender, that which is sent, and the one to whom it is sent. Only that knows itself.
Thank you very much.
That's pure non-duality expressed in the Sufi tradition.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Martin.
We've come to the end of our time with Rupert. He's been very generous to make this time available. Thank you, Rupert, for being here, and for you that have your hands up. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Rupert's doing a whole weekend retreat this coming weekend on You Are the Happiness You Seek. You can have your questions answered there, I'm sure. And thank you, Rupert, for joining with us today and for this.
Not at all, Bill. Thank you. It's a pleasure always to join your book club. I can see lots of messages from you all. Thank you all for your nice messages, and as sweet, as always, to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. And there will be a recording sent out, so you don't need to send an email to us. You'll get a link to the recording probably in a few hours. And Rupert, we'll see you this weekend.
See you at the weekend, some of you. God bless.
Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.